Ready to go?
Ready.
Good. I'll call this meeting of the Electoral Board to order. If you'd please rise for a moment of silence and then join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you all very much for being here on this cool winter day. Let's see, so the first order of business is the approval of minutes. Do we have the
minutes.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
a copy right there.
do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, we have the minutes for the February 6, 2024 board meeting and the post-election meeting and canvass, both of which have been circulated to the board members in the GR, and they have been approved. All of the corrections have been made, the suggestions, so I move that we accept both minutes as the minutes, official minutes.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes. Let's see. Well, so we will next move to report from electoral board members. Do you have anything, Mark?
I don't have anything, Mr. Chairman, thanks.
Okay. London?
No, I have nothing to report. The minutes have been approved, so
Okay.
that's a highlight.
Today's the 29th.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay, so next is the general registrar's report.
All right, so kind of a bunch of areas to cover today. Election preparations for the upcoming June primary. We are well underway. This year we have kind of back-to-back-to-back elections, so from the deadline for the candidates to file, which was less than 3 weeks ago, till now, we are moving along to get ready for this election. So you all as a body have already completed a lot of the prep for this. We talked about sort of the staffing plans, the early voting hours, the ballot order, a training plan, all that kind of stuff back in February. And you all approved it for both elections to kind of make sure we were moving along, since there was a real condensed time period between the two elections here. Early voting staffing is all complete and ready to go. That starts this Friday. Ballots were approved by the state. The ballots, we have put our sample ballots online for voters to go utilize. We added a little 7th and 10th district map on there to help people out with kind of figuring out which congressional district they are in. Election day staffing is pretty much done at this point. We do have party parity in all of our leadership positions, as well as pretty good partisan balance overall. Our officer training is pretty much following our plan from the March election. We have a lot of leadership positions that have already completed their certification back in the fall, and everyone's in good practice because really in the past 6 months or 7 months, the officers have done 2 elections previously, many of them. Now, we do lose a lot in the summer. I know that Dina told me earlier today we had about 400 that dropped off. People just have, vacation plans and things like that are going on in the summer, but they are fully staffed right now with some extras as well, so that's good. Our website is updated, so the sample ballots are on there. All the dates and times for everything is up online. We've completed logic and accuracy testing for mail voting and early voting. That all went well. Mail ballots are actually, I think they're going out today, correct? Okay, so mail ballots are going in the mail today.
Do you know how many we have?
I don't know the exact number. I want to say it's in the range of 15,000-ish, 17,000.
I can pull it up.
Wow.
Okay.
18?
Okay.
Natalia, is it
I think
18,000?
that's what Colleen says, 18.
Okay, 18,000. So about 18,000 mail ballots going out. And you all have a list of the tasks in front of you here. So there's a few things that are a little behind in this kind of compressed schedule, but one of those we'll take care of today. We talk about the ballot order. That covers about 3 different tasks on here. And we're finalizing things like training classes, wrapping up stuff for that. We are doing some final temp hiring. We're trying to add a few more temps for this election so that November is going to be our busiest election, and we're going to need temp staff that have some experience. So we're trying to bring some additional people in for this election so that we have a large crew when it comes to November and people that have some, experience. So that's ongoing right now. We've hired a couple additional people already, and we're interviewing more this week. So that's great. I think that's about it. I think things are pretty well on track to get rolling this election, and we've got a lot of our, procedures and processes kind of grooved in at this point. So the team's doing a really great job of just going out and executing that game plan that we've, developed over the past couple of years. So, any questions from you all about the?
I had a question, Eric, on the, for the tasks.
Yeah.
At the 70-day point, the item there, absentee, cancel permanent absentee ballot applications, inactive voters fall in the NCOA.
Yeah, we're waiting right now on the NCOA to be executed by the state. So that's happening on June 7th.
Okay.
So after that, we will update following that information. They had been doing it twice a year,
Right.
in February and then July. I don't know what happened with the February one. We didn't really get an explanation, but my guess is that because there was a March election this year, that kind of modified the schedule a little bit.
Okay.
So they did send us a notice that June 7th is when that will happen.
Okay.
And then I guess we'll find out down the road if they're going to do a subsequent one later this year, or if that will just be the one they're executing for this year.
Thank you.
Yep.
And then, and also questions at the 55-day point on page number 5.
Yeah.
The absentee, the update ballot curing logs and the curing letters and email templates. Do you have an update on those?
Yeah, they're just not done yet, I think, because we've had such a compressed schedule to get everything ready to send the ballots out.
Okay.
But I'm sure that the Colleen and the absentee
They
team will.
have been done.
Oh, they finished
They've
those
been
now?
completed.
Oh, okay.
Completed? Okay.
Yeah,
There we
completely.
go.
Thank you.
Let's cross out the knot there.
All good. All right.
And do those go out automatically to both party chairs? They don't have to sign up to get the curing logs or the?
We send them out routinely to both the
Okay.
party chairs so that they have, they keep up to date on it. I don't know if is it weekly or bi-weekly?
It's a manual process.
Yeah.
It really depends on what's going on as far as, if we don't have much change, then we wouldn't bother to
Right.
send it. But if there's a lot of activity going on, we sometimes even send it a little bit more often.
Excellent. That's great. No, again, I appreciate this. This is, I like this. It's almost as a dashboard. It shows
Yes.
us where we are, how we are in compliance. So it's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, and for those of you here who are not seeing this, that what we're looking at is a list of there's a public copy out front, and we do post them online, but it is a copy of kind of where we're at with all of our tasks. We have about 330 tasks outlined for each election, that we have deadlines that we have to meet, so it helps us to kind of see where we're ahead, where we're behind, where we need to catch up, all that kind of stuff. All right, so we're talking about military and overseas voters a little bit today. This was brought up, I think it was late last year, early this year, about what we do for military and overseas voters. Like a number of other groups, military members and overseas voters often vote at a lower rate than sort of the general populace. So we want to make sure that we are adhering to best practices with this audience to make sure that we're creating, we've talked about before in meetings how the process of voting and the decision to vote, there are certain responsibilities you have to take as a citizen to to know where to go to vote, to fill out your ballot properly, those kind of things. But we want to limit the barriers as much as we can to that process. So what I've got here is a list of best practices from the EAC, the Election Assistance Commission, and it talks about basically about 6 things you should target as an agency. And I'm going to talk about what we do in each of those areas. So first best practice was identify ballots being mailed to military members so that they can make sure that they see it when it arrives. It doesn't just blend in with the other mail. So you can see here is a copy of the front of our envelope. We have bright envelopes with big colors that stand out. The county and the election seals convey the officiality of these documents, so it does draw attention to it when it arrives. Another best practice is to understand restrictions to email attachments and links. So we don't have any attachments on ours. That can get a little more complicated. So we have easy-to-use links that are provided, and we've had good feedback from our users, from our military members that have told us that the process is pretty easy to use. So that's been positive. Using standardized addresses. The state system has address standardization to some extent. So there are things that get eliminated through that process. We also get any return mail that comes back if we have an address issue. But that is really rare. We find that actually is less common than our population at large. And the state does do routine audits of addresses, so we have to go through, the state will send us a list periodically of addresses that are non-conforming, that could be problematic, so that we can review them to see if there's some kind of issue that we need to address. Another best practice is to not wait until Uwakava Saturday. So Uwakava Saturday would be this coming Saturday. So that's the 45-day mark before the election. Our ballots are going out today, so pretty typical for elections for us that we mail them about 4 to 7 days prior to Uwakava Saturday. We try to get them out as early as we can so that they are actually arriving at or just before that 45-day mark. And we have roughly 75% of our military and overseas voters get email ballots, so they are getting them much more quickly than those that are going out in the mail, which can take several days to arrive, especially if it's to an overseas address. So we do have a very high sign-up rate for our email ballots among our military and overseas voters.
So the ones that you're mailing out, they're all handled by the vendor. They don't come out of this office, right? The ones where you mail them a paper ballot.
Correct, yes. Yeah. Another best practice is use jargon-free language in communications. If you work on the staff, you would know that I say all the time, make it shorter, make it simpler. People don't read, make it short enough that they're going to want to read. So if you see the instructions here, you notice that the whole instructions are less than 20 words. And that's just because a lot of times people will not read things if they're too long. So we try to keep it very simple, we try to keep it very direct, and we try to make sure that we don't have any jargon in there that's going to confuse voters when they get these communications, because the language that we may use internally may be a little different than the language that the general public uses. So we try to follow that. Now the last one is one that I think we need to check into and work on a little bit more. This is ensuring military and overseas voters can view your website. So we haven't had any issues reported to us on this, but that doesn't mean it's not something we should investigate further. So we're going to check into this because if you have a limited population that's viewing this, then there may not be that many issues. They may not be reporting them to you. Mm-hmm. So we're going to check into this. We don't have any evidence that says that there's a problem viewing our website overseas, but we're going to try to do some verification on that to see if we can make sure that we're meeting that best practice as well.
How does this show up on the website? Is it easily, if you look at it, this is the military overseas process that they can click on easily? They don't have to go through multiple clicks to get there?
It just depends on what section they're going to. So there's not I don't think there is an explicit military voters section on the website. So that could be something that we could look into as a linked area for those voters. Oh, there is? Oh, I'm sorry.
Because I recall on the front, there's something about a notice for
Yes.
over, and I guess you could put all the information, or it may already be there, everything they need to know.
Yeah,
with
that's a
that link.
required notice that we have to post.
Okay.
So, oh, it goes to the state, it's a link to the state Department of Elections has a military and overseas section, and that's where our site links to. So, but yeah, that notice is put up each election. But we'll look at that standardization for overseas, because we need to see what some of those limits might be in countries that are where our military and overseas members are posted. Some additional things outside of those standards that we do have dedicated staff to this. So we have a staff person who focuses almost exclusively on ballots going to military and overseas members. She has more than 10 years experience. Her supervisor has more than 10 years experience. So they have a lot of experience behind them in assisting these voters. We do get a lot of compliments from military and overseas members for the work that we do on that. We do send reminders. If we don't have ballots returned, we send reminders, and we do try to make sure we're doing routine communication with that group. So it's not a huge group, so it is very manageable, but we do make sure we have a dedicated staff person that follows up with that. Any other questions about that?
So you said about 75% of these people vote by email. Do you have just sort of a ballpark figure, how many email ballots? Those all have to be processed by the absentee. Just in a general election, how many actual email ballots have to be returned and processed?
How many return or how many we send out?
How many are returned?
Oh, very small number, depends on the election.
Okay.
We will have a higher return this November.
Right.
But it's usually out of 200 about emails that we send
Okay.
overseas. It's not that large amount, maybe like tops 50 tops.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not big at all.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so next we're going to talk a little bit about ballot curing. So ballot curing, again, just to provide the overview here, is when a mail ballot is returned by a voter, usually with a material omission such as their last name is missing, the signature's missing, year of birth is missing, that invalidates the ballot if that's not fixed. And there's the code section. You can find this in the administrative code. There can be other reasons for a ballot curing. Sometimes we get a mail ballot returned and the envelope is there, but there's no ballot inside of it. So there are exceptions. There are a number of things in this area that can happen, but the most common thing is someone's just missing their signature, and especially now with the new requirements on the envelope, Virginia now requires year of birth and social security number, and those are the most common things that we see that are missing. So a couple of terms here that we're going to talk about. Return rate, so that's the ballots cast by the mail voters. Sent to curing means the mail ballot has been identified as having an issue, so we get a few percent of each ballot that come back, so we might get 1,000 ballots and maybe we have 20 or 30 that get sent to curing to be logged and then to follow up with that voter. The cure rate then would be among those ballots that get sent to curing, which ones are fixed by the voter such that their ballot can count. So we looked at this over our last few years of elections here to see what our overall return rate is, how often they're sent to curing, and what the cure rate is. Now, I'd say off the bat on this table, I would cross out this first one, and that's because this is during the pandemic, so you can see the curing rate is very low. The number sent to curing is very low, and the cure rate is very high, and that's because the limitations, the requirements were limited during that time. So this is kind of our anomaly. If you look at the rest of these, we see pretty consistent numbers overall with a few exceptions. So you can see our return rate is much higher during general elections. We usually get about 3/4 roughly of those ballots that get sent back. Now, among those that are sent back, the number that are sent to curing, it averages overall just under 3%. You can see in the general election in 2023, that actually increased to 4.1%. And that's because that was the first election where social security number and year of birth were used. So naturally, there were a lot of people that weren't used to that. They made mistakes. You can see that already in the primary election we had in March, that came down a full percentage point. What you can also see is that our cure rate from previous elections, our overall average is about 52%, but you can see it really hasn't hit 60% outside of that first pandemic election there until the last couple elections here. That's because we have a new affidavit from the state that's making it easier for voters to send back and tell us that they've correct some kind of mistake that they've made. So that gives you kind of an overview of how often we see these issues. So basically, of the ballots we get about 3% of them that have some kind of problem. And among those, somewhere between 50 and 60% of them get cured. Sometimes voters just, they don't follow up. We talk to them, they say they're gonna send back and fix the issue, but they just don't. So again, this comes back to there is some responsibility that the voter has to take to follow up when they've made a mistake. The most common issues that we see, as I mentioned, missing or incorrect social security number, missing or incorrect year of birth, and then no signature. This is about 70%, pretty consistently the last couple elections, about 70% of our cure issues are those three problems. So some things we're trying to do to make this make the impact as minimal as possible in terms of the number of voters whose ballots are not counting. Again, going back to simple design, making easy instructions with few words. We do have helpful features on our envelopes, such as like peel and stick seal that goes on there. It makes it a little easier for voters to send it back correctly. And we also have a one return envelope system. So I know in the past, and in a lot of jurisdictions in Virginia, you'll still find multiple envelopes. It can get a little confusing for people. So the one return envelope is a little easier. And we do dedicated follow-up from staff. So we do follow up with these voters and communicate with them. This is just an example here of the instructions that we have. We're constantly looking to revise these. Our envelope is actually a little more streamlined in terms of having that one required information section really be a stand apart and makes it a little easier than some jurisdictions have. So in the future, we're going to continue to look at that envelope design, see how we can simplify that. We're working on some communication tools that create automated communications, such as we have a table that we put them in, and at certain intervals that will send out automated emails to those voters, letting them know that they have not cured their ballot or letting them know when they have cured their ballot. We're still working on that, and it does help if we have the email from the voters, which we don't always have. We're using a lot of this data. Colleen does a really great job of curating and collecting all of this data and enabling us to see where we could make improvements in the design of our information, in our communication tools. And we're going to try to add this to our agency performance measures to look at ways we can sort of continue to track these numbers over time so that we can set some goals for where we want to be. A little bit hard because ultimately, mistakes people make is not something we can control, but we can try to be ahead of that as much as possible.
Could you go back to the chart?
The numbers?
Yeah, so November 2023, so does that mean that of all the mail ballots that were returned to the office, 68% of them had something missing?
No. 68% of the ballots we sent out were returned to our office.
Okay.
The sent to curing is the number. So 4% of the ballots had an issue. 96% of the ballots were fine. 4% of the ballots had some kind of defect or problem, some kind of material omission. They didn't put their ballot in the envelope. They didn't sign the envelope, those kind of things. And then among that 4%, 61% of those were fixed, by the deadline. So we usually, the most common ones with the cure rate that don't get fixed are the ones that are coming in really close to the deadline, because then voters don't have as much time to fix them. So generally, a good thing for voters to do, obviously, is to send it in early, but we are all procrastinators to a certain degree, and so it's always hard to get everybody to do that. Ideally, you'd like to see people fill out the form too. If you look at the form here, we had birth year and last four kind of stick out a little bit in the form, and we even put the format in it to make it a little easier for people. But you give 100 people a form, and there's always going to be some mistakes. I think what you look at is what's the threshold for that, and if it's above a certain amount, then you need to do something to redesign it in a way that is going to work. So, but I think our ballot sent to curing is pretty consistent with other jurisdictions around the state. So,
So once we identify that this ballot needs to be cured, then we contact the voter using whatever best information we have.
Yeah.
Email, phone, whatever. And then the voter has several options that they can take in order to cure the ballot.
Yes.
Including coming in and voting in person in one of the early vote centers, using the affidavit, or requesting another ballot being sent to them.
Yes.
So as long as as long as we identify the cure early enough, the voter has at least 3 options to cure the ballot
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, there's a lot of different options, and we, explain that to them when we talk to them. We send them out communications, and we track all that to make sure that we have communicated with them at a certain point. And we're trying to build something right now that increases that level of communication and automates it to some degree to try to, to pester people
Right.
to make sure they get their ballot to count.
Well, and it's not as big a deal in primaries, but in general elections, in addition to our office contacting the voter, the parties they receive the cure log, and they're reaching out to the voter also, bugging them, say, hey, your ballot hasn't been cured yet, here's how you do it, and so, they're getting multiple contacts from this office and from the candidates or the party about how they can cure their ballots.
Yeah, we get complaints sometimes that maybe it's good though. Maybe they're pestered enough that they they get their ballot in just to make people stop calling.
Well,
them.
there's political science data about how many contacts you have to make with the voter in order to actually get them to the polls to vote. And so, the campaigns say, well, we have to do this many phone calls and this many mailers, and so, yeah, people may get tired of being bugged, but, that's the role of the parties to drive people to the polling places, so.
I think the good thing too is with the permanent absentee list, a lot of these voters are doing this, and once you've kind of done it for an election or two, you know what you have to complete, so that really helps.
Eric, can you shed any light on why they only require the birth year and not the birth date?
I don't know. That's just what that's the state code was, that they have to put the birth year and they have to put the last 4 of their social security number. So we do actually we do run into problems with that where people put their birth date sometimes, or they'll put their month and their year. So it's been a little bit of a challenge, but we try to make it clear, especially with the formatting already laid out for them. But yeah, that's just what the requirement was from the legislature.
That's very helpful. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, yeah.
I would request that we continue to do this, and at the future board meetings, it's typically a couple months after the election. So, for example, the June election, we make a note to do this in probably the August timeframe. Bring that to the board meeting. I think it's helpful for the citizens to see the tracking of the data and the good work that the staff is doing.
Sure thing. Okay, budget planning. So the current fiscal year 24, we're on track. About 73% of spending with reimbursement factored in. We get reimbursed for from the state for this past March election. We got a reimbursement requested a little over $600,000 from that. So right now we had a little bit of an issue about a month ago because our budget was getting close to full, and we were having some problems with the county, but we worked it out, letting them know that we were in fact getting significant reimbursement coming from the state. So a little bit of a challenge this year with 3 elections, but we are tracking pretty well for our budget spending, so that's really good. For fiscal year 25, a couple initiatives. We did get funding for the IT analyst position, so that's an additional position we'll be adding. We'll be hiring 2 full-time staff this summer. One is a voter registration associate. That's going to be a full-time position now. That's been vacant. And the new IT analyst position, which is a position that'll help with all kinds of different things, from making sure we're meeting state standards to assisting staff with a large temp staff now. Really helps to have someone helping us with that IT infrastructure, to doing maintenance on the voting machines and really providing some help for our staff. You know, we only have a couple staff, John and Sean, who are really excellent at knowing the ins and outs of all of our equipment and software that runs it. And having an additional position in the county our size will be very helpful, because right now, if one of those guys is sick, it puts a heck of a lot of burden on the other one. So this is good for sort of continuity of operations as well. So that we'll be working on to hire those this summer. We also got just under $400,000 for the presidential election. That's going to support additional election officers, our increased number of early voting locations for the presidential election, some overtime, increased ballot printing, all those things. And this is a significant reduction from our ask back in 2020, which was near around $1 million. So I think this gives us the money that we need to execute the tasks we need to without being overly burdensome on the taxpayer. There is budget information available as well if the public would like to go check it out. The Office of Management Budget has an excellent budget page. They have, you can go and see each department's budget in detail, and their spending and their revenue. You can see, they have a question section. So if you have a topic you're interested in, if you wanted to go and see if there's any questions related to elections, you can go and search that question database. And it will show a little more detail on a particular topic that someone asked. So really good resource there.
Is the IT person going to help with FOIA requests? 'Cause
Yeah.
I anticipate, being a presidential year, there's going to be a huge influx of FOIA requests from all over the country, so.
Yeah. I mean, it's our FOIA requests are down a little this year from what they've been over the last couple of years.
It's only April.
But yeah, it's early.
Still early, yes.
I imagine in the fall we'll have, you know, quite a few more. But yeah, that'll be an additional thing that they'll help with as well. So, let's see. New early voting ordinance. So this is slated right now for adoption and a vote on May 14th. So I presented to the Board of County Supervisors, and then they set this for a public hearing, and it's being advertised. So assuming that goes through on May 14th, we would wait then for the Attorney General's certificate of no objection after that. And then this would be implemented for the November election. So we are going to send a voter guide in September to help inform people of what the hours are going to be for this election and the locations they can go to, since that will be slight change from the past. The basic elements of it, all 5 satellite locations that we have right now are going to be open every election. The start time is going to vary, 1 week for a primary, 2 weeks for a general, 3 weeks for presidential. They preserve Sunday voting, and the Electoral Board sets uniform hours for all of the satellite offices. The Supervisor Bodie in particular mentioned that he was interested in the office trying out evening hours possibly in the fall. So if you guys want to think about that as we get closer to the fall in terms of what hours you want to set, the ordinance does say that the voting sites have to be open for at least 6 hours, and that the hours have to be the same at each location. But other than that, it's up to you all to kind of set what hours you think are appropriate for each election, and you have some flexibility there.
So this basically codifies at least 3 weekend days of voting, 1 Sunday and 2 Saturdays for every election. And,
Yeah.
okay.
And it'll be more for the presidential. So for this fall, we'll have 5, there'll be 2 Sundays and 3 Saturdays. So a lot of weekend options available for voters, which is great.
And more locations.
Yeah, and
Yes.
more locations
Right.
than in the past.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Yep. Very good.
all right, so looking, I think Mark asked if we could look a little bit more at this, at our data related to check-ins versus ballots. And what this is basically, after each election, when we go to certify, we have to record and review not only what our results are that that the board certifies, and then we post all of our tapes online, But we have to look at the number of voters that have checked in at each location. And these rarely match up exactly. They usually do, this is all election day data itself here. They usually do really well for absentee, obviously, which is the CAP officers, and then the early voting officers, a lot of experienced officers, and we get matches on those. But election day can be a little bit different. And what the state does when we send in our data is if we have a precinct or location that's off by more than 3%, they tell us we have to, review and provide some kind of explanation for that, or look at what reason there might be. And the idea being obviously that we want the check-in numbers to match the ballots as closely as possible. You can see here that we actually do really well with this in terms of, we're far below that 3% threshold in any given election. And you'll notice that it's always a little bit under too. The check-in numbers are always just a tiny bit under what the number of ballots cast were. Now that's because the common problems that we see with the check-ins, basically, just officers making a mistake. I mean, if you're looking at like the November 2023 election, you have almost 75,000 transactions that are happening on election day. Well, you would expect that not all those transactions would go perfectly. In this case, we had 65 less than the ballots. And that's because our most common thing is a voter not being checked in. Sometimes they might also check in the wrong voter, so it is possible to have more check-ins than ballots. You might have a precinct where, let's say they checked in, there's a father-son with the same name, and they checked in the son when they meant to check in the father. They go back and they check in both. So there are different mistakes that happen that make those not match up. Also, occasionally a voter just leaves without voting. Maybe they get a cell phone call, there's an emergency, they have to leave the precinct, they leave their ballot, or something like that where they've already been checked in, but they're not gonna have a ballot that's been cast. And occasionally we do have equipment issue that has to be solved, maybe like a poll book that's not syncing correctly, although usually by the time we reach this point, we've gone through and we've been able to sync that up after the election to make sure that all the data is being preserved properly. So here's just an example. Unfortunately, it's a little faded here, but you can see the chief from this one particular precinct saying the difference between the number of voters and the ballots is off by 1 because one of the election officers did not complete the check-in process, basically. So it's just a common mistake we see, especially early in the day. Sometimes officers make it once or twice early in the day. They get corrected by the chief, and then they don't make that mistake as the day wears on. But we do see that the numbers are well below. So we'll continue to study that. In terms of how to make improvements there, we are well within the threshold there, but we can continue to make training improvements. I do think that the more hands-on classes that we've added should help with that going forward. And changes and updates to poll books that I've seen in the past. Sometimes you can kind of dummy-proof your equipment to make it so that certain mistakes, can't be made. So.
Comment?
Yeah.
Thank you for presenting this. It is a complex endeavor, as you demonstrated there on using the data. We have 103 precincts across the county. Even if you did just a straight line math, that's at least 700, that's an average 700 voters per precinct. It's a testament, the fact that the state requirement is 3%, and our chiefs and our election officers routinely go well below that. It is a long day. It is a human endeavor, and it's just a testament to our training that's provided and the experience to our election officers, who are, by the way, just, they're not full-time professionals. They're just citizens doing their civic duty. So kudos to them, kudos to staff for providing that training, and kudos for you for showing this to the public. So I think, transparency is the best elixir out there for, concern about voter integrity, and this is just one step of demonstrating that to the public. It's not perfect, but it's, we'll just continue to monitor. Thanks.
It's 99.95%.
Darn close. Yes.
And
Darn close.
and I know that part of the training includes you ask the chiefs to check in every hour.
Yes, sir.
So that, they're matching the numbers on the poll book and the scan. So they don't figure out at 4 o'clock, oh, wait a minute, we're off to.
Yeah.
If they're doing the job correctly, they've been checking in, and when they identify an issue, it's, you know, right after it happened, not 6 hours later.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, just a compliment to our many officers too. I think, our staff does a good job with training and putting good people in positions, and we have a lot of really good officers, and I have to say, they generally do a really fantastic job. Having worked in a lot of jurisdictions, I can speak to the professionalism and the competency of the officers in Prince William County is very high. So kudos to all the election officers that go out there every election and get the job done. Okay, I voted sticker contest. So we currently have a sticker contest going on. We are nearing the end of it now. We have had a really successful contest. I have to say I am totally blown away by the quality of the entries that we've had. We had more than 570 entries into this contest. Now, to put that in context, I looked at a few others, and there were several jurisdictions. I've read 3 other jurisdictions that are similar size to us or a little smaller, and all 3 of them combined had like 130 entries. So we've really gotten a lot of participation in this, which is great. There's 2 groups in particular that Thalia has reached out to. That is the students and the graphic designers. So more than 3 and 4 of our entries were from Prince William County students, elementary school students, high school students. It was really great to see them all get involved. It was really hard to get this down to, we got it down to about 40 sort of finalists that the staff looked at, and from there, staff and the board looked at, selected, and voted on different ones, and we got it down to about 11 nominees, and they're just that good that if you look at the last 11 that we've got, and you're going to be seeing them soon, so if you're not following us on Twitter, you might want to follow us on Twitter or keep an eye on it.
X.
On our website. Yeah, oh, sorry, it's X now. X or our website, we're going to be posting, over the next couple weeks, these finalists. So kudos to Thalia and the whole sticker team that put a lot of work into sort of designing the contest, reaching out to people, and getting all these entries. It was really great. So right now, she is working with those designers, those 11 finalists that we've got, giving them a chance to kind of tweak their designs just a little bit to get them ready for the final vote. And then we're going to announce finalists in early May. I think that'll probably start like later this week, correct? Okay. So this week, those finalists will start being announced. You'll see the designs that made it. And then around the middle of this month, we're going to have voting by election officers. So soon, if you are an election officer, you're going to get an email. And since, as I noted just a few minutes ago, since they do so much to serve our community, we're going to let them decide which sticker they like the best. I have a feeling that we'll probably be using more than one of these too, with the quality of the designs as we look as we have a lot of different kinds of voting and looking forward into the future as well. So at our July board meeting, we'll be doing awards for the winners and announcements. So that is all coming in the upcoming months. And for the sticker contest voting, we're going to do a ranked choice voting. So the officers are going to get a link that's going to let them just sort of drag and drop all their favorites from their number 1 design to their number 11. And then from there, we will see which one gets the most votes. So, and that will be our I Voted sticker, and that's going to start in November is when we will start using that sticker. So, very exciting. Really cool. We had so many entries into that contest, and something really fun. I think the voters will be excited about that in November.
Good work.
And the vendors already identified, who's gonna print them and everything, so once you decide what we're gonna use.
We haven't gotten that far. We have gotten to, that's actually pretty, the turnaround on that's pretty quick. Those
Okay.
printers where you can send it off and have something back in like 10 days.
Oh, okay.
The earliest deadline is for our mail ballots. We have to have everything kind of ready in advance with our vendor there. So that's our first deadline, is to have it ready by the time they're getting all the templates set for the November election this summer. So, okay, voter reg report. I don't have a full copy of our report. We're going to provide that at the next Electoral board meeting, I did want to talk a little bit about voter challenges. Terry is here today. She has gotten some of this information. She and some others have been sending in, looking at voter information and sending in challenges to voter information that's stale, voters that are either generally falls in either the deceased or people that have moved to other areas sort of category. So we've had about 733 challenges that we've received. I'll note about 270 of these were either already canceled, they were already inactive, or they had updated their voter registration. So I think sometimes there's just that lag in different information sources and the action having been taken. So that's roughly a third of them or so. The other ones were, I have kind of a little mistake here. I shouldn't say they're marked as inactive. They're marked so that when the NCOA goes out, they're marked for confirmation is what what it should say there. Okay. So they will become inactive once that NCOA mailing is sent out. And then once they're inactive, obviously you have some limitations on your rights as a voter when you're inactive, and after a certain period of time, after 2 federal elections, you're canceled and removed from the rolls. The good news is that we've been looking at these as we've gone along. Do we have any voters that have tried to vote after the date that they supposedly moved or after the date they passed away? And we haven't found any yet. So that's really good news that the system is working, and so kudos to the people that are providing that additional information and doing that research. And I'm glad that we have a process now in the state. Both the state has kind of provided a pathway on obituaries and death records that wasn't there a couple years ago, and we now have a process in the county where when we get these, we process them as quickly as we can. And Natalia and Brittany and the voter registration team, they sort of document the categories, so it gives us just additional data to look at to kind of see what's happening with these groups, what the action that's been taken is, so we have that kind of all well documented. So just wanted to touch on that a little bit.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, new business, appointing new election officers.
All right, so you all have a list there. We did get, thanks. We have a number of Democrats, a number of Republicans. We did also have the Democratic chair reached out. There are 6 additional people at the bottom of the list there that are already currently officers, but they are nonpartisan officers, and they wanted to nominate them to represent the Democratic Party. So those are all on that list there. I think it's just a little shy of 100 officers in total. And we're going to continue. We've been talking about doing some additional recruiting this summer to make sure that we have both enough officers in general when November rolls around, but also to make sure that we're meeting the partisan requirements that we've got. Thankfully, we just had a big primary, so that gives us some fresh addresses to mail because, we have parts of the county in Brentsville and Gainesville where we have trouble getting enough Democratic officers. We have parts of the county in, Woodbridge and Potomac where we have trouble getting enough Republican officers. So we're going to try to do some more targeted recruitment to try to get some individuals that sort of help us balance out those numbers at all of our precincts. Because while we have been meeting that standard for a couple of years now, we have to continue to work at it and make sure that we always, people move out of county and decide they don't want to be an officer. So we're continuing to work on that.
And both party chairs have signed off on this list?
Yeah, we either, they signed off or we didn't have any objections to the individuals.
So I move that we approve the 29 April 24 election officer appointment list.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, so all these brand-new officers, they're required to do in-person training before they're assigned to a precinct.
They go to a new officer training class.
Okay.
So.
And these could all be assigned for the November election.
Yeah, well, and a number of them are going to be assigned for this upcoming June election too. So, since they're new officers now, it's great to get them in for a primary where it's not usually as busy.
Right.
So that they don't run for the hills when they work in November. Because I try to remind our officers the last couple elections, hey, remember how quiet and slow it's been in this election? Just remember that when November rolls around and it's a little hectic. So it's good that we're going to get a number of, another 100 officers or so here, a lot of whom are going to get some experience this June.
So are you comfortable sort of looking forward to November? You know, the total pool that we have to work with, we're going to have enough people to cover all the precincts in November.
I'm never comfortable.
All right.
I think that helps me be good at my job, though.
Right.
I think we're in a good shape now that we are, I know when I first started here, I was just like, we just had such a dearth of officers that really, if you're going to have, 1,500 officers in an election, for example, you really want 3,000 active officers. You want twice as many because people have health issues, scheduling issues. They're just not interested in working particular elections. So you want to make sure. So we're getting there. We're getting close to that now, where our active officers is really much higher than the officers we need in any given election. And we have to keep pushing there. The good thing is that come November, there's always a real natural influx of a lot of applications around election time. I think the challenge for us is going to be that a lot of those come too late. So we've been trying to get the message out to individuals that are interested in working. If you want to work in November, you've got to apply sooner, because if they're applying in, mid-October, we're not going to have time to have you guys appoint them and get them in for a training class and all that. So, and that's, there are just some restrictions in Virginia that make that process take a little bit more time. So we can't just drop somebody in that applies.
If you look at for those that are interested, if you look at the Prince William County Office of Election past progress list, it shows you the timing on there for election officer training. So to Keith's question, based on the June primary upcoming, the election officer training actually starts on the 4th of May. And then progress will start on the 9th of May. We'll unassign all EOs that cannot attend training. And then 30 days out, there's assigned canvas election officers. And 14 days out, replace all election officers been removed not to attend training. So there's a deliberate, methodical march. That's towards the election day for June. Yeah. And so you're reassured that training is taking place, and hopefully all the feedback mechanisms, whether it's through the couple of reports you all showed earlier, continue to update that. So good sign, good work.
Yeah. And kudos to Tommy and Dina and Rick, who are all here today. That Tommy runs all the sessions and manages kind of our training team that has to, figure out what we need to emphasize each election that's new. And Dina and Rick, they do all the cat herding that you just described with, people are constantly, dropping out. And, I started off at that position that kind of Dina's in this field. So I know what it's like. One day it's like, oh, we got everybody, we're great. And then the next day we had 7 people drop out. We need a chief in 107. So it is a constant process. And they've done a great job right now. We're in great shape. And maybe by next week we'll have some things to deal with. But, that's just kind of the nature of it. But they do an excellent job. And we've been very well staffed for each election. And I think that's important for not only the execution of the election, but for the officers to feel comfortable when they're out of the polling place. It's not a good feeling when you go out there and it's going to be a busy election and you're short a person and it's early and you're trying to scramble to get everything set up. You want to know that you're well supported. So not only do we do a good job of assigning officers to election day, but we have a whole backup officer system of officers that are on call on election day, so we can call them up and send them out to polling places that if, some polling place has 2 officers that don't show up for some reason, we've got a backup plan in place, so.
Very good.
All right. Signs at early voting locations.
Oops, I didn't go through that thing. Okay. So this is, the county right now is trying to finalize a sign policy for the primary. There's been a lot of back and forth on this. I was at a supervisors meeting a couple weeks ago. There were some complaints about this, and several of the supervisors, I think it was Weir and Franklin and maybe Bodie, all talked about this as an issue. I know you all know it's kind of an ongoing issue, and I don't think Prince William County is unique to this. This is something in every county that I've worked for that's kind of a challenge, just one, what the policy is for signs, and then two, especially who manages that, who enforces that. That's the thing that nobody really wants to touch. County employees don't want to do it, partly because sometimes their supervisors and their bosses are on the ballot and they don't want to get put in the crosshairs there. Our office is hesitant to do that because we don't want to, we want to maintain our nonpartisan status and don't want someone accusing us of favoring this party's sign or that party's sign. So that is really what the challenge is. But the county is, I know they're interested, and they mentioned during that meeting that they would really like to hear your all's input for what you think this should be going forward, because I think the county is trying to develop something for next year at least. I think this year probably leaning towards what we've basically had is a policy that there aren't signs allowed at sites, but that really hasn't been enforced that strongly. So it's just been a little bit of a challenge. So some options that we've got are defining an area at each location, setting a size and number of sign limit. This could be a prescriptive thing where we have defined rules in that area, which is good because you make it very clear to the campaigns, or you could do it really more of an open rules, which is good from the standpoint of, okay, this is your area, you can do whatever you want to within it, but what happens when one campaign takes up the whole area on the first day and upsets all the other campaigns? So it's a challenge. So I think they're eager to hear what ideas you all have and what approach you all would like to take to it.
Well, one of the challenges I think is just going to be able to have uniform enforcement across. So right now, depending on the location, there are rules in the past about campaign signs, and we're talking about the political signs candidates put outside the early voting. So when we first started using Ferlazzo, the rule was no campaign signs at Ferlazzo. And then after a couple of elections, the candidates started putting up the signs. They stayed there throughout the whole period. Nobody really enforced the policy. At the DMV, since the DMV controls, we rent space there, but the DMV controls basically the rules. There was an agreement between basically this office and the DMV. The DMV said candidates can have signs only during election day, so they have to show up every day, put the signs up, and then take them down at the end of the day. They can't leave them up. This office, for all the time that I've been around, has basically, they can put up as many signs as they want for the early voting period. And then the Haymarket Library, the library system has their own, they had their own rule, which for a while eventually became no campaign signs in the ground if you're holding them or you have them on a table. So all the locations had various policies based on who controls it. Is it the county? And I don't know whether the county can establish a policy for the DMV. It's not a Prince William County facility, it's a state facility. So I think that to the extent that we can, that if the supervisors want to do this, I think having a uniform policy that's the same at all the early vote locations, and I think a reasonable number of signs and allow them to stay up during the entire voting period, something like that. I think a total ban on campaign signs is probably unconstitutional. And if the county really became serious about enforcing it, I think there would probably be a lawsuit and you know, the county can put reasonable time, place restrictions, but I don't think they can constitutionally say no campaign signs at all. So and it really is not our issue. And, you know, we get drug into it depending on the location. And I get a call from, you know, somebody that, you know, the DMV is taking down our signs or whatever it is. And so if the supervisors want to establish a policy, then I would encourage something that reasonable limits on the number of signs. And also, I would say none of the big barnyard, the signs, you know, the smaller signs that people put in their yard, you can, you know, put a reasonable number of those up at an early voting location. But, you know, the huge signs, I don't think that, you know, they need to be there. But, you know, I mean, this is like, I guess, a conversation that the county attorney will have, you know, and the county attorney can look at other jurisdictions, and I think almost all of them allow a certain number of signs. There are some jurisdictions where I think they don't allow any signs at all, but nobody has challenged it. So,
Mr. Chairman, the Haymarket Library area is governed by a homeowners association, and they decided that they would not allow any signs.
well, yeah, the other challenge is the library controls a certain part of, you know, the facility, and then once you're past, you know, whatever the library's, you know, boundary is, then yeah, it's the homeowners association or somebody else that controls the property right along the road. So that's the other question is, even if the county wanted to adopt, you know, a policy on county facility, that they can't restrict what somebody puts on private property. For example, at the DMV, there's private property on both sides of the DMV. And so every election, people load up the signs off the DMV on the private property that they leave for the entire early voting period. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure that there's anything that the county can do with, you know, those things on private property. But yeah, you know, understanding what the boundaries are for what the county controls is important at the location also.
Yeah, I agree with the chairman and the secretary that it's complicated. I think, you know, I appreciate the board of supervisors asking this office. My recommendation would be that we suggest 3 guiding principles to the board of supervisors with respect to this issue. The first being consistent across the county. We've expanded, for early voting specifically, we've expanded from 3 to 5 locations, and those are all complicated, but the first guiding principle means it should be consistent. The second would be they should be simple and reasonable. Whatever the policy is, it should be simple and reasonable, sticking with, you know, what we try to do here in this board and across the general registrar's team. And finally, the third should be that it's easily enforceable. Because at the end of the day, you know, we're creating all these handcrafted wooden shoes, and what may work over here at this particular location won't necessarily work over there. And who's going to enforce it? You know, in a society where you want to have the rule of law, you know, it's no good unless it's that particular law or policy is enforceable. So, consistent across the county, simple and reasonable, and easily enforced. And those would be my recommendations that we suggest to the Board of Supervisors that they use to guide them to any future policy.
Good. All right, I can pass along that feedback. And just so you all know, a couple things. One, it's really the county manager's office really sets the policy because it's like a use policy. Right. So it doesn't really go through. Obviously, the county supervisors provide input and guidance on this, but they don't have to pass anything for the county to put a policy in place. And I do know they have talked about, a couple of you talked about uniformity. They have talked about that because I know that one of the challenges with this has been that even within the county properties, the library properties versus other properties have had different rules, and they have talked about making those so that they're the same at all locations, regardless of what department that property is. The importance is that, that they have early voting, and I did convey to them too in those conversations. I think the signs are helpful. I think that having the signs up lets voters know, oh, early voting is going on. They're going by these locations. The signs pop up. Oh, there's an election happening. Let me go look up what election this is. And I think it does help people with just alerting people to the fact that there's an election going on. So, but all right, well, we'll continue to work on that. But I'll consolidate this and pass this on to the county managers and CC you all. So, okay.
All right, next is modification to the June ballot order.
Oh, yeah. So we looked at the ballot order from the last election. You all have a chart. Oh, thanks. You all have a chart here that has, we'd like to modify that ballot order and basically scale it back a little bit. I think, it never hurts to have extra ballots in the sense that obviously the election is run well with them. But I think we had so many that if we dial it back a little bit, I think we can save about $40,000 this upcoming election and reducing our ballot total from somewhere around 300,000. Now we have to have extra because you've got to have both ballots for both parties at all these locations. But the good thing is if you're looking at this chart here, the left-hand column shows you precinct by precinct how many voters each one has. And then there's a column that shows the Republican March 2024 and Dem March 2024. That's how many voters we had in each precinct. And what we've suggested is we've looked at sort of modifying our order based on that with the supposition here is that the Republican turnout was, I think, a little higher in this primary than what we might see in June, and that we want to make sure we have beyond a certain threshold. So you'll notice that there's if you look at the number of ballots there were voted in the last election, we have at least 2.5 times as many of those for the upcoming June election. And the Democratic turnout was pretty low with a basically non-competitive race. Might be a little higher. So we have somewhere between 5 to 7 times as many ballots as what we saw previously. In both cases, this is reducing our order total, but it's reducing it down to about 200,000 ballots, which we would expect somewhere around, 65,000 voters would probably be a lot for June.
Yeah.
So it still has enough. And we also track this throughout the day. The sites report how many ballots they have. And so if we do have a particular precinct where we see, oh, you know what, they have 1,000 ballots, they already have about 450 voters, it's the middle of the day, we have the ability to print a couple hundred extra ballots and send them out to them. I don't think that will be the case even with these numbers, but it does give us a backup plan in case there's any kind of issue. So if this makes sense to you all, we think it would save a little money, but still put us in that, okay, I really think it's a highly unlikely scenario that we're going to surpass any of these totals. And the nice thing is we were able to use really granular data with each precinct and each party for this past election.
Mr. Chairman, I'm comfortable with the data and the requests. I don't see any issues.
Okay, so the only question I have is that these are probably two of the most competitive congressional races in the whole country.
Yeah.
Both open seats, both highly contested in both parties. We've got like 12 Democrats running in the 10th, something like that. I think we have 6 or so in the 7th. The Republicans have multiple candidates. So yeah, it's a June congressional primary. But in some cases, I think there may be more interest in this primary than there was in the presidential primary, at least among Democrats.
Yeah.
So you're comfortable that even reducing these, that we're still going to have plenty of ballots?
Yeah, because there's still, like, just as an example, so precinct 104 has 4,000 voters. We're talking about, we only saw 100 Democratic voters in that precinct for the primary. We only saw 560 Republican voters. We're talking about an order of 1,450 ballots for the Republicans and 1,050 for the Democrats, which still puts us at, orders of magnitude beyond what we saw. So even if we had double turnout, which would make it basically the highest turnout in a congressional primary we've ever seen, we're still in the good in this scenario.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. And we're gonna have a lot of voters that use, mail voting and early voting as well. So this is just for election day, because for the ballot order for the mail ballots is per when each ballot is sent out, and we do on demand for early voting. So those are precise to the number of ballots we need. This is just for election day.
Okay.
You need a motion to approve that? We need that. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm, motion to approve the revised election officer day ballot order, June 2024 primary election.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right. Then we have the post-election schedule.
Okay, so a couple things here. We're meeting pretty late in April. Do you all still want to go forward with a meeting in May? And
Do we need one?
question for you all.
I think we're good.
Yeah. Do you,
Mr. Chairman, I think we're good.
do you want a meeting in May?
Sure. Why not?
What do you guys want to do?
We did one, it would have to be towards probably the end of the month.
Yeah.
Right? It'd probably, if we did, it'd be easier for your team, right, as we prep for
Yeah, I think towards that would make sense.
last week in May.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I realize that's also, what is that, Memorial Day?
Yes, 28th.
28th
I
is
believe
Memorial
28th,
Day.
yeah. Monday.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll send you guys out a few different dates then.
27th.
Yeah.
Okay.
27th
Okay.
is Monday.
Okay.
And then, so the issue in June is,
The Juneteenth holiday is the day after the election, but I think from the emails you all sent, sounds like you guys are fine with, well, I think we'd prefer just to go ahead and work that next day, and, that's when canvass takes place. We want to make sure that the results are right, check those as quickly as possible. We want to make sure to we still have this 7-day time limit, so we want to make sure that we have enough time to do everything. So I think we'll just proceed with our kind of typical canvass on the Wednesday, provisional meeting likely on Saturday, and then certification on either the following Monday or Tuesday, if that works for you guys.
is there any issue with so I assume the county's going to be closed, the courthouse will be closed. There's no issue with us, having access to the courthouse?
No, I mean, we'll see. I would guess that we would be able to drop off stuff, the initial drop off election, the day after the election in that morning. I will talk with them to see. I wouldn't think that would be a problem. I would imagine they have, security over there, even when they're closed. I would think there's still personnel in the building.
Right.
So we just have to make sure there's personnel there that can accept it and, sign chain of custody and all that kind of stuff. So we'll check on that. And as it relates to the canvas, we don't follow some smaller counties might meet the deadline of returning the materials by the day after the election at noon. Our canvas generally lasts either till the end of the day after the election, or oftentimes goes into the next day,
Right.
in which case we just return the materials when we're done with that canvas. So we're still within the law there. So if we just follow our regular schedule, we should be fine. And we will check with the court on sort of like the delivery that first thing in that morning, the envelope 3 and envelope 6s. So.
Okay. All right. So that concludes our agenda, except for public comment. Is there anyone in the, did we have a sign-up thing outside? or-
Yeah, we do.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we have one person sign up, Brianna Altman.
Hi, I'm Brianna Altman. I am from the Occoquan District, and I have served as an election officer here in Prince William, very proudly, I will add. I was also very fortunate that in 2022, I was given the opportunity to be an observer in CURE, and there were two of us, one representing the Republicans and one representing the Democrats, so we had parity even in our observers, and again, emphasizing we were both election officers. I understand that we have stopped doing that. I did it in 2022. We stopped providing observers to the CURE process in 2023. I hope my information was correct. And I'd like to recommend that we get back to that we do that again in 2024. I know I was warned it can be boring. I'm not going to deny that, but at the same time, I think the transparency is important. And if in fact there are any problems after the fact, we know that we've had representatives there that could question if there was something that they thought shouldn't have been approved and put through. So again, very experienced people are provided to the process in CURE, but the idea of having a representative from each party present, and the mail's coming in, the ballots are being checked, and then it goes on to CAP, and in CAP, there are observers, poll watchers allowed there. So I just feel that's one area where maybe worth spending a little extra money in the budget just to make sure down the road there's no problems that come back after the fact. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. And thanks for being an election officer.
You're very welcome.
All right. Anyone else like to make a public comment? All right. So we will close public comments. And now we're ready for a closed session.
Mr. Chair, I move that the Electoral Board go into closed session pursuant to Virginia State Code, Section 22-3711 for Alpha 1 and Alpha 34 for the purpose of discussing issues related to these various topics.
Second the motion.
All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you.
Early voting starts Friday, right?
Yeah.
I'm leaving, Greg.
Nicely done.
Okay.